The snowstorm had been building for hours, swallowing the quiet rural road one drifting curtain at a time. By the time the traveler stepped out of his broken-down car, the wind felt sharp enough to cut. It carried the kind of cold that seeped into bone, that made the world shrink to breath and heartbeat, and the fear that no help was coming. He wrapped his thin jacket tighter. It wasn't enough. Nothing felt enough. Headlights appeared through the wall of white, slow, cautious, the kind of driving someone does when they know these roads too well. The truck stopped beside him with a hiss of brakes, and the door opened with a low groan. The man who climbed out looked like he'd been carved from the heart of winter itself, rugged, broad-shouldered, late 40s or early 50s. He wore a heavy coat lined with shearling, and his scarf was tucked neatly against his throat. His eyes were the only warm thing about him, steady, dark, taking in the younger man's shaking hands and chattering breath. "You'll freeze out here," he said, voice deep and certain. "Come with me." There was no suspicion in his tone, no room for argument, only a quiet concern that settled between them like falling snow. The traveler hesitated, because that's what fear makes people do. But the cold pressed harder, pushing him forward. The older man stepped aside, guiding him toward the truck's open door with a hand hovering near his back, careful not to touch unless needed. His movements were gentle, as if he was trying not to startle a frightened animal. "I'm taking you to my cabin," he said. "It's close. You'll get warm there." The traveler slid into the truck, teeth rattling. When the door shut, the world outside became a muffled blur of snow and wind. Inside, everything smelled faintly of pine and something warm, like cedar smoke clinging to wool. The older man drove with both hands steady on the wheel, glancing over only when the younger man's shaking became too strong to ignore. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Eli," the traveler whispered. The older man nodded once. "I'm Rowan." The name suited him, solid, rooted, like the trees bowing in the storm around them. For a few minutes, the cabin lights were just a distant glow through a forest weighed down by white. But as the truck pulled up, Eli stared. The place looked like something out of a story, soft lights in the windows, smoke curling from the chimney, a porch buried in snow. It felt safe in a way he hadn't expected. Rowan turned off the engine and unbuckled his seat belt with a soft click. "There's one rule," he said, meeting Eli's eyes with a seriousness that made the younger man swallow. "Once we're inside, you stay close to the fire. I don't want you going numb." Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. Rowan helped him out of the truck, walking him carefully over the icy path. Every time Eli's legs wobbled, Rowan's hand steadied him, not grabbing, just guiding. It felt strangely intimate, in a protective, unfamiliar way. Inside, the cabin was warm enough to sting Eli's skin. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, flames crackling, casting orange light across wooden walls and the soft, worn furniture that clearly belonged to someone who lived simply but lived with care. "Sit," Rowan instructed gently. "Right here, as close as you can tolerate." Eli lowered himself onto the rug before the fire, feeling heat seep into him. Rowan disappeared into another room, returning with blankets, thick, woolen, smelling faintly of lavender and smoke. He wrapped one around Eli's shoulders with slow, careful hands. "You're freezing," Rowan murmured. "Just breathe. Let the heat do the rest." Eli's breath trembled. His eyes stung, not from the fire, but from something else he couldn't name. Maybe relief. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the strange comfort of being cared for. Rowan sat beside him, not touching, just near enough that Eli could feel the warmth of another person. The firelight softened Rowan's features, revealing worry that he wasn't trying to hide. "You shouldn't have been out there alone," he said. "My car died," Eli whispered. "And I didn't know where else to go." Rowan nodded slowly. "Well, you're here now." For a while, they didn't speak. The storm battered at the windows, but inside, everything felt still, like the cabin existed in a different world, untouched by the wildness outside. Eli shifted a little closer to the fire. His shivers eased. His breathing steadied. When he glanced sideways, Rowan was watching him, not intensely, not uncomfortably, but in a way that suggested he was taking quiet inventory of every tremor fading from Eli's hands. "You look a little less like you're about to faint," Rowan said softly. "Thanks to you." "Anyone would have stopped," Rowan replied. Eli shook his head. "Not anyone." Rowan didn't argue, but something in his expression softened, as if those words mattered more to him than he expected. The quiet stretched between them again, warm now, threaded with something gentle. At one point, Rowan rose to stir the fire, adding more wood. Eli watched him, how he moved with slow precision, how he seemed to know exactly when to give warmth and when to give space. There was a steadiness about him that Eli found grounding, almost soothing. "You'll stay here tonight," Rowan said. "Storm's not letting up." Eli nodded, the warmth finally reaching his heart. "Thank you. Really." Rowan's gaze met his, deep, unreadable, yet strangely kind. "You don't have to thank me. Just stay near the fire. That's all I ask." The rule. The one Rowan had repeated with quiet urgency. Eli didn't understand why it mattered so much, but he followed it, because something in Rowan's voice made it feel like more than a rule. It felt like a promise. "And now, before we continue, imagine you were stranded in a snowstorm like this. A stranger, quiet, rugged, older, opens his cabin to you with one rule. Stay close to the fire. Would you trust him? Would you step inside? Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear what the storm would feel like in your part of the world." The storm deepened as the night settled in, pressing against the cabin walls like a living thing. Wind curled under the eaves with a low, restless hum. But inside, the firelight painted everything in gold and quiet warmth. Eli stayed wrapped in the blanket, feeling heat return to his fingers like a slow sunrise. Rowan moved through the space with practiced ease. He lit a small lamp on the side table, softening the shadows. Then he stepped into the kitchen corner, opening cupboards with gentle clinks and muted thuds. Eli watched him, feeling strangely anchored by the sound. "You hungry?" Rowan asked. Eli hesitated. "A little." Rowan glanced over. That sounded like yes. There was no pressure in his voice, only a quiet attentiveness that felt safer than Eli expected. Rowan set a pot on the stove, pouring in water, adding dried herbs that released a warm scent, thyme, rosemary, something earthy and calming. Eli shifted closer to the hearth, stretching his numbed legs toward the flames. He felt heavy, not with exhaustion, but with a kind of emotional warmth that came only from being noticed. Cared for. Rowan wasn't trying to impress him, or overwhelm him. He simply existed with a steady kind of kindness. "What were you doing out on that road?" Rowan asked gently. Eli rubbed his hands together. "Trying to get home. Long drive." "Long enough," Eli murmured. "Too long for a car that old." Rowan stirred the pot, steam rising around him. "You shouldn't have been alone in that weather." Eli smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's had to rescue people before." Rowan's shoulders moved in a small shrug. "Living out here, you learn the signs. Storms don't care if someone's scared or tired or running late." The last words carried a quiet echo, as if Rowan wasn't talking only about Eli. The soup simmered, filling the cabin with the scent of warmth. Rowan brought a bowl to Eli and crouched beside him. The fire lit half of Rowan's face, leaving the other in soft darkness. "Careful," Rowan said. "It's hot." Eli wrapped his hands around the bowl, feeling the heat soak into him. Rowan watched closely, making sure he didn't spill or tremble too badly. It wasn't the gaze of a man studying a stranger. It was something gentler, quieter, almost protective. "This is good," Eli said after a careful sip. Rowan huffed a soft laugh. "It's soup. Hard to mess up." "No, I mean," Eli met his eyes. "Thank you. For everything." Rowan didn't smile, but something in him eased, as if a tight knot loosened in his chest. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "That's all that matters." Eli nodded, but didn't look away. The fire crackled between them, warm and steady. After a moment, Rowan rose and added another log to the flames. The sparks jumped, lighting the curve of his jaw and the strong lines of his hands. "Stay close to the fire," Rowan reminded, softer this time. Almost apologetic. Eli tilted his head. "Why does that matter so much?" Rowan paused, hand hovering near the poker. His gaze drifted to the window, where the storm lashed against the glass. "Cold can be tricky," Rowan said quietly. "Takes hold before you notice. I've seen people fall asleep thinking they're fine." His voice gentled. "I don't want that happening to you." Eli swallowed. "You sound like you've lost someone before." Rowan's stillness answered before his words did. "A long time ago," Rowan murmured. "Someone young. Someone I should have watched more closely." Eli's breath caught. Not from fear, but from understanding. Rowan's rule wasn't strict, it was grief. Worn carefully like an old coat he never took off. The fire snapped softly. Rowan breathed in, steadying himself. "It won't happen again. Not if I can help it." Eli shifted toward him. "You don't have to carry that alone." Rowan's eyes lifted to his, dark, familiar, wounded. "I've carried it so long I don't know how to set it down." Eli's voice was soft. "Maybe you just did." They didn't touch. They didn't move closer. But the air changed, Not sharp, not sudden, just a quiet tug between two people who had been cold in different ways for far too long. Rowan exhaled, the sound soft and shaky. He stood, retreating to the kitchen, needing space he couldn't quite name. Eli stayed by the fire, watching him. Not out of curiosity, but with the quiet empathy of someone who understood how grief made people pull back. Rowan returned a few minutes later with a second blanket. "You're warming up," Rowan said, kneeling beside him again. "But your hands are still cold." He took Eli's hand not fully, just the tips of Eli's fingers brushing the underside of Rowan's palm. A cautious, hesitant touch. Rowan wrapped the new blanket around him, making sure it stayed snug around Eli's shoulders. Their hands brushed again, brief, warm, grounding. Eli inhaled. Rowan paused. They both felt it. Not desire. Not tension. Something quieter. A recognition. Rowan withdrew his hand gently, as if not to startle him. "I'll sleep in the other room," Rowan said. "You stay here, close to the fire." His voice softened. "Promise me." "I promise." Rowan hesitated in the doorway. The lamplight behind him blurred into a halo, making his silhouette look almost fragile beneath the strength he carried. "Good night, Eli," Rowan said. His voice held something unsteady. Something new. Eli watched him disappear down the hall, then leaned back against the pillows Rowan had placed behind him. The storm raged outside, wild and merciless. But in the cabin, warmth settled into every corner. Into the space where Rowan had sat. Into the bowl Rowan had handed him. Into the air between them that felt too full to ignore. Eli closed his eyes, letting the fire's glow soak into him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Not truly. Not here. Not with Rowan. The fire had burned low by the time Rowan returned in the early morning, drawn by a quiet instinct he didn't question. Eli lay curled beneath the blankets, breathing softly. Warmth finally settled into his cheeks. Rowan paused in the doorway, relief loosening something deep in his chest. Eli stirred. "You're up early." Rowan knelt beside him, checking the fire, checking him. "Did you stay warm?" Eli nodded. "Because of you." Their eyes held. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Just two people who had kept each other from slipping into the cold in different ways. "I heard you," Eli whispered. "Last night, when you thought I was asleep." Rowan stilled. "You said you hoped I'd make it through the night." Rowan swallowed. "I did." Eli reached out, hesitant, gentle, and touched Rowan's wrist. "I'm here, because you let me be." Rowan let out a slow breath, the kind that carried years of grief and something new rising beneath it. "You can stay by the fire as long as you need," Rowan said. "And you don't have to face the storm alone anymore." Eli's hand slid into Rowan's with quiet certainty. "Neither do you." The storm outside eased. Inside, something warmer began.